I am live. According to the Google machine, I am live. Happy Friday as I'm recording this, as I'm streaming. Let's see what's going on. Well, I got a few things going on. Before I get into, so I thought for today, let's see. I don't have anything in particular. Well, that's not true. I do have a couple things in particular. And because I'm organized, I'm going to use my phone to pull up. But before I get into that, well, just not really anything particular. I thought I could answer, or at least there were a couple of things that got posted to the tubes, or I mean, I should say comments posted to on my particular tubes that I could talk about. But first, before any of that, and hold on, let me take a drink of cold water for the working man. I think I may turn on my fan a little bit more. Definitely getting warm in here. First off, I want to give a shout out to a guy and his daughter who, for what was it? Let's see. This was, I guess this was yesterday. A guy and his daughter who I met very briefly outside the Artist and Craftsman Supply Shop in Brooklyn. I was, wait, was this yesterday? What's today? Thursday? Yeah, I guess it was yesterday. Hey, Matt. Yesterday, I was bumping around. I had off for Juneteenth. I was bumping around with my wife. Actually, went and got a massage, which was very nice. And then we were kind of just doing stuff afterwards. She wanted to stop at the grocery store. I decided to walk over to the Artist and Craftsman Supply Shop. And they're moving, which was a little bit of a bummer to me, just because that location is kind of convenient, not super convenient, but it's not bad for me. The other look there where they're moving to, it'll be fine, but it's just not quite as, I'm not in that area as much. Any case, I was looking around to see if they had some kind of craftsy type stuff. And as I was exiting the store, I didn't find anything. They seem to be moving stock already to the new shop, so that the shelves are a little bit bare. But I was trying to figure out where to go next, because my original idea was I would go get a coffee or something and await pickup from my wife who was driving. And so I kind of had my head in my phone a little bit, and I'm moving towards the door, and I actually, you hit the double doors, but only one of them you can actually open. So I kind of bump into, I'm sort of fumbling my way through the doors, and then I hold the door. I can tell there's somebody behind me, so I hold the door open, and the gentleman comes out with his daughter, and he says, thanks, and I say, sure, no problem. I start walking away, and he says, hey man, I like your channel, I like your channel, enjoy the content, and I was like, oh wow. Cool. So, it made my day that I got recognized out in the wild being the Z-list non-celebrity that I am. So that was kind of fun. So if you're out there, hats off to you, my friend. Thank you very much. It was fun. That's all in that news. Hey, pen, dice, and paper. How are you? It is Friday. Friday is always good. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So next up on this hit parade, I had earlier this week on this channel, as opposed to the Behind the Screens channel, I posted I streamed, I guess, the discussion over my playtest from Monday, and I got a long message. I'm going to read it. Got a long message from RKO Matt, and not RKO like the like archaeology RKO. Not what was the radio whatever. Anyway, RKO Matt posted a long comment. So here it is. I'm glad to hear the playtest for your game went so well. Maybe now you'll get more playtesters at the next Encounters night you attend. It's interesting how fragmented it sounds like the game awareness is amongst contemporary players. In the early 80s, Dragon Magazine was my primary source of information about new or different games. By the mid-1980s, I had better access to a dedicated game or hobby shop, but still relied on Dragon for more insight into what the different games offered, at least for the ones in shrink-wrapped boxes. Pew Research suggests that 96% of all adults in the U.S. are using the internet, with even the 65-plus age group being at 90% for 2024. It would seem like the information saturation about new or different games is at an all-time high. Assuming that people playing one game would at least look for more information about that particular game, it seems likely that most players of any game are being presented with information about a range of games currently in the marketplace. even if there is low incentive to look into new games, when one's playgroup already has something with which they are satisfied, I would still have thought that awareness of fundamental groupings like old school versus modern games, being a prevalent discussion topic in tabletop role-playing game spaces, had a higher degree of penetration, even at the very casual levels of player. So basically they're saying, like, look, there's so many people on the internet, and everybody's on the internet pretty much, right? And if you're just looking for stuff about games, you're just bound to run into stuff about games in different games. And I don't disagree with any of that, but I think what the part of the issue, I think, is, or what we have to grapple with, maybe I should say, is that there's a lot of walled gardens, or maybe I should call them semi-walled gardens. There's a lot of places where a lot of people don't go. They're not looking for it. I know that of my... I was going to go to Drive-Thru RPG to look just to see something, but I typed in Dive-Thru RPG. Just in case you're wondering, there is no Dive-Thru RPG. You can end up in a situation in which you are... Yes, you may be interested in games, but you're looking for D&D. So maybe you type in D&D 5th edition. You go there. Or maybe you go to Wizards of the Coast. You go to these sources, and then you're just presented with, the stuff that you're looking for, Wizards of the Coast, D&D. But you're not necessarily, this idea that because you're on the internet, you're getting all this, you're getting what was the word they used? That you're basically getting presented with information. I think sometimes that can be a little bit overblown. Sure, if I go to the drive-thru, like I'm looking at a Drive-Thru RPG's homepage, I'm getting hit with a whole bunch of games. But to be honest, and Drive-Thru doesn't have the best interface. It's kind of, you're such awash in all these different covers. I don't know that that's really penetrating somebody. Somebody who's looking for D&D is probably just going to go, oh gosh, and then go type search D&D. If they came to that homepage at all, as opposed to going to the DM's Guild, or as opposed to, like I said, going straight to WotC or straight to another person another vendor or site that basically specializes in 5th edition, or to another storefront. And I think that a lot of these communities, like a lot of the forums and a lot of the Reddits, and particularly things like Discord, they are kind of walled. I know that maybe folks out there haven't had the same problem, but I find oftentimes when I'm searching, a lot of forums don't show up. I know all the stuff like Pro Boards. I never see stuff come up. I know Pro Boards has an OD&D 74 group, and I know they have some groups. I never see their results pop up. I usually have to go there specifically and say, let me go there. Or I got to go to Dragon's Foot. I know Dragon's Foot exists, so I will go to Dragon's Foot and search, as opposed to Dragon's Foot coming up in my search. If you don't know the term OSR, how do you even start to search for the term OSR? What does it even... What does it mean? And the funny thing is with OSR is, even in terms of hashtagging all that stuff, you get confused with old school RuneScape, which also is like OSRS, I think, or it might even be OSR also. So between the fact that you have places like Discord that are basically unreachable, and so to get on the Discord, you have to be on Discord. And I have family members. I mean, I think I know a lot of people who aren't on Discord, who just don't want to know, or maybe I could get them onto one Discord, but they're not. I'm on too many Discords. But a lot of folks aren't on that. I know a lot of folks who don't use Reddit. They're not going to Reddit. But where are they going? If they're looking for news at all. So I don't think it's about like you're on the internet, so magically you're going to get all the stuff. It's kind of like, well, you have to be on the internet. You have to sort of find your way to these communities, and you have to kind of get embedded in these communities. And that's why I think that there's a kind of a funnel effect. I mean, this is a known thing in marketing. They talk about the sales funnel, right? Where you get a whole bunch of people that will hit the top, which is kind of would be they've seen your commercial, or they stumble upon something. And then it's, as you're going down that funnel, you're losing people every step of the way. I've said this before. You have so many people who may, for me as a creator, I have so many people who may be subscribed to me on YouTube, let's say. But then of that number, a much less number may actually interact with me in any way. And a much less number will follow a link that I might post. And then a less number than that might actually act on the link that I post. Everything's in this funnel. If you're on social media, you might see the same thing. Yeah, you post it, I get seen X amount of times, but then there's when you actually look at who's actually read your post or maybe interacted some way, all these numbers are continually going down. And I think the same thing with the internet. You have this really broad internet, but most people are not making it past that top level. Either they don't want to, or they don't know where to look. So I just think that I always find it interesting. What to me is the most interesting part is when you recognize those levels, so that you see, oh, these people are already on itch, so they're already getting access to kind of indie games. They're already at a level where they're past that sort of maybe going to drive through and ending up in DMs Guild. So I'm like, they're an itch. They're seeing a lot of different stuff, and they still don't really know what the OSR is. And yeah, sure, some of that's going to be contextual, right? But I find it interesting. It's always a reminder that how niche within niches within niches within niches. But and I think this is going to be a problem. Well, I mean, it is a problem already with the Discord situation because Discord's not searchable. Whatever. I feel like they're already kind of going down that enshittification highway. Who knows what happens down the line with that? I don't know. But I don't know what happens to all your data that you've built up in these different forums that you're on, or I should say these Discord servers. It's not accessible on search right now. I don't know if you're going to have some way to archive it to get it off of there to make it searchable, but it means that unless someone stumbles upon something that gives them an invitation to a Discord, they don't know anything about it, and there's no way for them to know about it. I mean, even for well-known Discords, you find out people are going, does someone have an invitation to get to this Discord? I'm trying to get on Matt Colville's Discord or whatever, that not his personal, whatever, the Draw Steel. Does somebody have the link? And this is for people who already know, and it can be difficult. So imagine if you don't know, and you either see people talking about it, and you don't even know what the heck it is, or you just don't even know to know. Like, you don't know to ask the question. You don't know to say, I'm interested in people still playing AD&D. I should be looking for old school D&D, or you might type in AD&D. You know what I mean? There's a lot. I think there's a lot of reasons there where it doesn't necessarily percolate. What I find fascinating sometimes is I see people who seem to have gotten to play Powered by the Apocalypse, but not gotten to the OSR. But I think one thing with the OSR is, as much as people see it, as much as it's become a marketing term in kind of the bubble, if you go to a shop, you might see systems or things that are OSR, but they're not. They don't necessarily highlight that. You're just buying the thing. And then but people, there's more of a Powered by the Apocalypse is kind of a thing that I think is presented as sort of a unified front. Whereas, yeah, people will sometimes put an OSR logo in the bottom of their book or anything, but you don't really see as much focus on this as part of a unified sort of network of games kind of thing. Pen Dice and Paper says, we need the early 1990s internet directories of links by topic. Yeah, I mean, there would be a lot of helpful stuff. And I don't know whether the new, because I got some marketing bot pinged me with, like, the new SEO is going to be called generative search, and that's going to be powered by, large language models and whatnot. And I don't know if that stuff will make it easier, that they'll do a better job. I also don't know if a lot of these forums and places really just turn off, they just put the don't no index kind of stuff up, which is just worrisome because it just means that people can't find things. But a lot of people just aren't interested in interacting with the hobby. I think that's maybe the last thing on this, is that there are a lot of people who just don't want to interact. I mean, let's face it, some of these spaces aren't always the most friendly. You get a lot of obnoxious rules lawyers, jerky kind of people in there. And, you see some of the responses. And if you read one of those posts where someone just decides to be a jerk, I saw one posted on Facebook today where someone's just posting like, hey, I had a session 0 for my new game with 7 players. And just kind of like, hey, look, I did this, and there's a picture. And when I read it, the first 2 comments were, 7 players is too much. I can't believe you ran with 7 players. And you know what I want to say? Like, that's fine, I guess, but it's not, who cares? No one's asking you. The guy wasn't asking you, should I do 7 players? He'd already had the session 0. He was just kind of posting something saying, I already ran the thing. I had the session 0, and presumably he didn't say. Presumably it was fine, and it wasn't even in the question. Like, wow, 7 players seems like a lot. I'm glad. How did it go? Right, where it's a conversation. It's just, no, 7 players is too much. And if you're some person and you're like, oh, I'm interested in D&D, and I happen to his Facebook, and you see some of that, you might be thinking to yourself, I don't want anything to do with this. These guys are just jerks. I mean, the internet's kind of jerky to begin with, so I don't blame people who have the better sense than I do just to not engage with it. Say, you know what, I'll just stick to playing whatever game on my phone, or maybe I'll do whatever, but I'm not going to get in those rabbit holes. I think a lot of people don't, and there's not that much, and there's not a lot of reason to. I mean, I find a lot of fulfilling. Obviously, I do this, and I find it fulfilling, but a lot of people don't, and it's easy to end up in the wrong place, get the wrong people. think there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't work. Okay, so I wanted to respond to that. I will have to later on. I will link to this so Archaeo Matt can see it. Yeah, because like I said, I don't think it's about how percentage is on the internet. I think people use the internet for a lot of different things. I think if you think about your parents, relatives, spouses, I'm sure everybody, if you look around your family members and your friends, you'll see different people who use the internet in very different ways. Some folks, presumably, if you're in here, you're probably one of those who's delving deep into these different games, these different systems, and really getting in there. And you're a member of a bunch of Discords and for all these different game systems and a bunch of stuff. And you're on all these things and you're following channels like mine and going in deep. And then you have other people who maybe are in your game and play games and run games who just aren't on any of that stuff. And I think there's a lot more of them than there are the people who are deep diving everywhere. That's my thought anyway. But I know this is a very non-scientific thing. I will just tend to ask people questions. Like I'll ask when I run into some kind of grognard types that are sort of from my age group previously before, I tend to ask them if they ran AD&D with all the rules. And for younger people, when I see they're running kind of OSR adjacent games, this kind of thing, I tend to ask them, hey, have you heard about the OSR? Because for me, the AD&D thing is just kind of funny. But the OSR part is because I want it to be a vibrant community of not just older folks it becomes an engine for reminiscing. But, there's a lot going on. I know there's a lot of younger people. It's not all old people. But, I just want to spread the word or see if the word has been spread. And so far, it's been fairly, or have not seen much in terms of word spreading. Okay, that is that. So now, what did I have? Did I have something else? I thought I did. Oh yes. Let me find the comment, and I can hold on a minute, and I will pull up. I'll pull up an aid. Let's see if I can find the aid. Where am I looking? Oh yeah, I think I really need to get a better system for organizing my stuff. So what I had which one's this? Region, area, region. Nope, not that one. I will go to. Nope, not that one. I will go to. No. All right, hold on a minute. I will find the right file. There we go. Okay, I'll use this one. All right. So let me switch gears. So I had posted a little while ago. Let me see. Let me switch up my windows here. There we go. Okay. I had posted this, and it's up on, where are we looking at? Up on itch, I think. It's some, let me zoom in here. It is some dice flowers. You notice there's a bit missing here at the end. It's a dice flower with a notch. Though I suppose you can vertically align them with, if you were going to put another one of these below, this would pop down there. And I got the comment. Let me see here now to find the comment. Tick, 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 tick. Okay, this comment was from R. Flem, who said, I like how you made a hex system combined with a D66 chart. What are some ways you might use this? I'd love to see you walking through how you might prep for a hex crawl session using this. Okay, well, this is not a full walkthrough. Maybe I will do a walkthrough at some point. The idea behind this is, well, a couple fold. So the main one is, just as a general rule, I like to use randomness. I like to leverage dice when I can. If I don't have something, is that great? I mean, I don't know. I feel like right? Dice is a great remedy for having a lack of imagination or inspiration, or when essentially you don't necessarily want to make a decision. You have three towns, and one of them has to get crushed by a mountain falling from the sky, but you don't want to choose. You don't want to decide. You don't want to feel like you're playing favorites. There's one of those towns you like a lot, the other two you don't care about, but you don't want to just summarily destroy one. And sometimes it's nice to destroy the things that you love in these games. So you want to let the dice decide, right? So you're going to roll some dice. You're going to say town 1, you're 1 to 2. Town 2, you're 3 to 4. And town 2, you're 3 to 4. And town 3, you're 5 to 6. And roll dice and see what happens. So I like having those. I like having things that give me those kinds of tools. The problem with your hex crawl, or your problem with your hex flower is that if we look at this thing in the center here, it's got 7 spots. If you count the middle as 1, you have 1, and then you have 6 surrounding, which is 7. So it doesn't fit evenly in a die rolling scheme. And there probably is some mathematical way with some combination of dice to get there. I don't want to have to figure that out or remember it or keep track of it or do it. I just want to have something simple. So I tended to, when I did my Joy of Hex maps, which uses random hex selection within a map template similar to this, but instead of using a flower, in that case, I'm using more of a rectangle. I wanted to have something that I could clearly use for generating things. So in that case, let me see, I can bring that up too. Can I bring it up? Well, I should be able to. Hold on a minute. As usual, not having stuff prepped well enough ahead of time. Let's see, do I have a... Oh, that's that, but where's mine? Did I have a template? I might not have. No, I did. I think I did. I know I did. Okay, I guess I didn't do it with that one. I have it somewhere. I'll have to find it. In any case, I have this one. I have one where I did it in rows and columns. Maybe I did it for a particular project. Now I'm thinking about it. But if I go back to the Joy of Hex maps and I go to where I'm creating sites, which is down... Oh, it might be... Hold on. It might be in another... Oh, it might be in the other, my little beta thing. Hold on a minute. That might be. I might be looking at the beta. Yep, the hex stocking beta. Beta. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's where. Okay, so I have this beta document. I'm gonna merge it in. So here you can see in the beta document, I've got these columns and rows so that you can generate your hexes. Now this works fine for me, but I do find that people love their hex flowers. So I thought about, well, how can I get something like this that has the usability? Basically, I get to just use a D66, which means that you take D66, if you're not familiar with it, you roll 2 6-sided dice as if they were 10-sided dice, as if you're rolling percentile dice, as they say. But instead of using, 1 for the 1 to 10 or 0 to 9 as 10s and 0 to 9, as the 1s, you're doing 6s instead. So you go from 11 to 66. So for this, it works pretty well because you just start at, if one die is your row and 1 die is your column, you just run down and you've got it. So, here it's, row 3, column, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 rows down, right? Easy peasy. It works pretty well. But knowing that people like their hex flowers, I started thinking about, well, how can I adapt that to this sort of more flower design? And without trying to get into some kind of complicated math and dice manipulations, the easiest way I found is just to clip off 1 die or 1 hex to make it there's a gap where the flowers, the hex flower stem, there's a gap. And I went with the bottom because I wanted to have trying to have a pretty clean spiral. So what I like about this one is you just go down the list, and I like the rows and columns. I do, I think for the most part, I do like this one better in terms of usability. It's not as pretty. It doesn't look pretty. This one, whatever you may feel about my stylings, has that sort of flower thing that people like. And in this case, instead of going rows and columns, you're going to go in a spiral from the middle. So 1, 1 is the middle, and then you're going around, and you're just going to go around, and you're going to go around until you get to 66. So yes, while you are missing that, there's a little cutout here that just prevents the fact that you don't have a 67. And I thought about trying to figure out, well, should you roll a third die and use that some kind of control die? And I just didn't know how to work it. I didn't know how to make it work. There probably is some way, but it just gets the thing is with everything is I'm sure somebody could figure it out and write a whole thing about it. But if it gets, I just don't want it to be complicated, any more complicated than doing a D66 or something like that. If it starts to be, well, if it's this, it's on Tuesday, you add a 1, and if it's raining, you minus 1, and if you do this, you do that. I don't want it. Do not want. I just want something simple. So that was to make that happen, I had to compromise, and that was the compromise. Take out a notch in the bottom, but it does mean that you can get it. The only other compromise you could have is just not to have the center hex be affected, which wouldn't be terrible if you were just using this to generate terrain, because you could say, okay, I'm going to generate overall terrain for this region, and that would go in the center and everything around it. Like that could work. But the other part of it, to kind of get more onto what the questioner, what the commenter, R. Flem, was referring to is, hey, Brian Smith, is that, how do you use it in play? What do you do in play, right? How does this work? So you can use it. I use it in two ways. So I do use it as part of the creation. And if you have bought the Joy of Hex maps, you can bring up my Hex Talking beta, which has all these things where you're rolling for sites and you're placing them. You're rolling for sites, you place them in here, and then you go through and do stuff. But that's during your creation part of it. Afterwards, you can have something like, okay, let's say I'm going to have, however your world is set up. Let's just say you say, you know what, once a month I'm going to roll for regional events. So you roll for some event, I don't know, and you get, it's a catastrophe, it's related to weather, and you want to look and say, where was it centered? Where did this thing happen? Where did the tornado touch down? Where did the big storm hit? So I rolled 55. So I can just come around and say, it happened here. And maybe it's got a range. Maybe I could roll another die saying, you know what, what's the scope of it? Oh, I got 3. So it's going to go out 3. Well, that's pretty big. So it's going to go woo, something like that, whoosh around. So there was a huge storm. Its epicenter was in 55, and it went out all the way like that, right? So great. Or you might want to say, hey, you know what? There's a new, maybe it's a different. You could do it as part of the same monthly thing. Maybe you want to do it on a different schedule. However, hey, I want a new monster is showing up, right? Okay, so where is its lair? Did I roll 55 again? No, I roll. Okay, let's not roll a 5. Gosh, I'm rolling 56. There we go, 31. Something a little different. Okay, it's here. So you go, you know what? There's a monster is here. Oh, it's in 31. There it is. Or monster, weather type things. Anything. Where does Broodmother Sky Fortress show up? I need to roll a die. Really, maybe there's a, look at that. We're going to do a gold rush kind of scenario. Where did they find? It doesn't have to necessarily be gold. Where did they find it? They found it in 24. So you look around, you go 24. This is where they discovered some new material, or there was there's a new dungeon. 25. Right next door, there's a dungeon that they found. So people were excavating or doing something out, then they ran to a new dungeon. So there's all kinds of, to me, there's all kinds of reasons why on a regional level I might want to pick a particular hex, and I might want to have it by chance. Another thing I thought about, we actually looked at this. I forget what we were exactly looking at, but you could also roll, and I'll put a note in here somewhere. It's really not, as to if you're starting in a hex. Michael Stengel says, I'm a little confused by this. Is this an engine like Hexflower or a map? It is a hex map in the shape of a flower. It is not a hex flower like a mechanism that's using a hex flower to do stuff. This is just blank. I'm just using a blank one because I'm lazy. I suppose I could put one in and start sticking things in here. This is a hex map. So you would fill this out in the map. The numbers all correspond to different. This would be a region. A region, and these are all hexes in the region. And then this is where you would write down all your hexes. The region. Hopefully that clears it up. Sorry if it was confusing. Now, it's not a hex flower in the sense of we're going to generate things using kind of a hex flower as a mechanism like a drunkard's walk kind of thing. It's a little bit of a different animal. So in this case, so I was going to say is that you can have another thing where if you wanted to have, and this one doesn't really, this has nothing to do, this is just another way of if you wanted to generate sort of random locations. If you have a starting area, let's say the party's located in here in 11, what you can also do is you can roll 2 dice. And again, this has nothing to do with this map in particular. And okay, I got 5. So what happens is you can go, all you have to do is know the directions, right? So you might start here and go 1, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 6. So then I know I'm going in this direction 5, and then I'm going 1 space out. So then something happened here. That's another thing you can do. If you have a site that you want to be your anchor, you can kind of go out anchor stuff. But this one kind of takes the whole thing. And now Hex Flowers' mechanisms, the problem of having 7 choices doesn't really matter because you usually start in the middle and then you're all about that kind of moving outwards. You don't really have to pick one of the 7 as a starting spot. Whereas when you're rolling dice on a hex map, you want the center to also be a potential hit, right? So you end up with, well, what do I do with 7? How do I get to 7? And you know, like I said, there are probably ways. I'm sure there are ways. I don't know how complicated those ways are, but there are most likely. I would bet there are ways. I just don't know them. I'm not trying to get that complicated with them. So hopefully, in a not too roundabout way, I answered R. Flem's question about the hex maps. I guess the last thing. No, I guess I don't have a last thing. It's Friday. Oh, no, I do have a last thing. Haha, I do have a last thing, but I don't need this map for it. My normal Thursday game got canceled yesterday because Daniel's not feeling well. So send your well wishes over to Daniel. But I was able to sneak into. I'm lucky enough in a sense that I've got. Thursday, I guess I'm lucky and unlucky at the same time. Lucky or unlucky in that there's a lot of things. There's a few things that I'm aware of going on in Brooklyn that I'm privy to, but they all tend to happen on Thursdays. And since I play in the game, I don't get to take advantage of those other things that are happening. It's fine. You have to make choices in life. I'm super happy with what I'm doing. The positive side is in this case, when something broke, which was Daniel. So he couldn't run his game yesterday. I was able to send out a message and hop into another game, and that was last night. That was a Cairn 2 game, and one I hadn't really. I don't know if I'd seen the Cairn 2 box in person. I might have seen it, but I don't think I really got to check it out too much. It's a nice little box set. I like Yochai's choice of having, and it worked out perfectly for us. So I guess the box has one of the warden's guides and 3 of the player's guides, and we were 4 people, 1 DM and 3 players. So we each got to have our own guide for the night. We didn't actually use it, which was kind of funny in a sense, or I don't know. I'll get into it in a minute. But before I do that, hold on. Pen, dice, and paper says. An idea for a physical product takes the same hex flower and makes it a box bounded by walls and a D6 or a D12 of quote-unquote events. Roll the die inside the box and you get an event where the die lands. Yeah, I like those die drop kind of mechanisms, but since I do so much digitally, I'm not going to put it into like tabletop simulator or something to do die drop. So I kind of think they're fun. And yeah, if you're doing it physically, you could totally do some fun stuff with die drops. I just don't tend to be able to work that way too much. So as much as I kind of appreciate them as a thing, that just doesn't work. Because, the other thing for me too is often it's not even so much that I don't have, I could drop dice here, but I don't have the thing printed out. So I either got to make the representation and do the dice drops on it if it's something that has, like a bullseye or some kind of radiuses or whatever. If it's just die drops on a table and then or on a blank sheet because you're going to do a map around it or something, that's fine. I just do things otherwise. But yeah, die drops are cool. I just don't tend to get into them too much. Brian says, I wonder how small a box you could get that to work with for a micro game. I mean, they're getting micro games really small and still getting quite a lot in there. So I think you can do it. You just have to be clever with how you implement it. Anyway, back to the game. So we generated our characters, and we weren't worried. I mean, this is one of the interesting things. Like, he kind of ditched a lot of the sort of odd like things because he didn't really. He felt like, hey, I'd rather you guys just come up with your own sort of look and things. You don't have to grab a look rolling through all those tables if you don't want to, like the stringy hair and the whatever. I think I ended up not, because I had, I don't know, I was what was my character? A Fletch something. I don't think it was a Fletch Ward. Hold on, let me pull up I got a picture. I know I took a picture of it. Let me see. Was a Fletch something. Fletch the Entertainer. Fletchy. Let me see. Hold on a second. I was I guess I just gotta save these. I gotta come up with a better way to save some stuff from my phone to my PC. Okay, I got that. So if I open this again, all right, now let me switch. I'll switch over so you can see my lovely photos. Okay. Well, this was my guy. His name was Flint Pluck Fletchwind. He was a Fletchwind. Now and so I just didn't. There was in the book there was kind of an old guy picture, so I kind of just drew the same old guy picture. Hey, Watcher DM, welcome aboard. And I just took the two. I took one first name and one last name from the names, the sort of example names listed. His trait was he's too old for this ish. He did have falconry. He did have a falcon. And then he had a bond about this Dawn Brigade that he had some blood red flower. Right now is white. And I think if it turns red, then, I owe the Dawn Brigade a favor. I had some stuff. The last three here I actually got as we were playing the game, but and I rolled completely average stats. And then let me see if I go to one of these other ones, you could see my notes. So he wasn't using some of the odd likes, though. We got he did the inventory and all that stuff, but just in terms of the appearance stuff, and then he wasn't that concerned about. I rolled the bond just to roll it, but we weren't really going to mess with. I mean, we were kind of doing it as sort of a one shot style, or like a limited run. So some of the things like that kind of omen, unless it was going to come up as part of the one shot, I suppose you could, if you're running a Cairn one, you could go and look at how people's things are and try to relate it into what's going on. But in this case, he wasn't really, that wasn't really part of the plan. He wasn't worried about that. So the scenario was that we were sent. So I guess the scenario was that there was a Lord Augustus, who I guess is I don't know if he was a duke. I want to say I heard he might have been called a duke at some point. Can't remember. Had sent some negotiator and some armed men up to this mining camp in the mountains, or really a mining town up in the mountains. The mining town, I guess the miners themselves had formed some kind of collective where they were essentially doing their own profit sharing kind of thing. They were not owned, or they were not subject directly to, I'm going to just call him Duke because there's another Lord guy that shows up, to Duke Augustus. And this obviously was something that Duke Augustus could not abide. So he'd sent this person up there to negotiate, to try to figure out how to get the Duke in. But then I guess after sending this person out there, the Duke got word that assassins had been dispatched to take out their negotiator, not for what they were doing up in the mountains, but because I guess they were very good at their job, and had some stuff had happened earlier. Their last mission, their last errand had created some bad blood, and that bad blood was decided to strike back. So the three of us, for reasons obviously just we happen to be there, and it's a game, because we definitely don't seem like the type to be, we're not exactly cut out for this particular job. were set out to go up to the mining town and kind of just try to keep her safe, but doing it in a way. And I know there've been movies that have done this where we're trying to protect the person without them knowing that they're protecting us. The idea was that no, don't make contact with her and tell her that people are out to kill her, or that the Duke didn't trust her. Just kind of protect her sort of from a distance, right? Just kind of be. I was like, okay. So we headed out and we had our first encounter with something strange happening as we're going through. I guess there was, and there might be more to the story about this because we didn't finish. But go on the road to the town and a related supporting village. We're passing through, I guess, a ruined village or ruined town. And we don't know yet the connections. I probably should have asked. Connections between whatever these ruins are and the extant town. In any case, when we're in the ruins, we see some like shadowy figure kind of flitting around the edges. So we try to figure out what to do. We nothing really comes to mind, and we were kind of wondering, should we follow them? Should we just attack them? Should we do whatever? But we decide to call out because maybe it's just maybe it's just a guy who's lost or on the road like us, whatever. I was thinking it was an assassin because they seemed like they were skulking around, but it turned out to be a dude, just a kind of normal guy, but he wasn't in right mind. Normal in the sense, didn't seem to be an assassin in any case, but he was transforming into a werewolf. It happened to be a full moon as we're coming in the evening. Happened to be a werewolf. Well, one of the other characters had some kind of thing in their kit where it basically was some kind of little entanglement thing, so they could throw it. And then whatever got hit with the entanglement thing was entangled for some moment of time. So he was quick thinking, and the guy, we see, and the thing transforms into a wolf and seems to be kind of growling. He's like, I throw that thing. And, it entangled the wolf. And then we ended up doing is because it doesn't say it's not a permanent entanglement, but I think in the book it says for some time or for a little time. Some amount of time. And in that time, we used somebody else's rope and we basically collared and tied up this wolf. And then we put it on a little, because it was a ruin. So we picked up some timbers, some other things that were laying about, and we made kind of a sled. And because it's snow also was coming out, we're kind of, it's the beginning of winter. We're kind of getting into this town right before winter basically is going to isolate it. And we drag it up to the town. And apparently after the fact, the GM was saying that was one of the things that they were not expecting, had not expected us to to that, that we would actually capture the werewolf as opposed to doing something else. But that was the one thing that was as close to a combat, because we were almost in combat. I had my bow out and I was about ready, and I forget what the other guy was doing. And no, Brian, we were pulling it on the sled. No werewolf power. I don't think we trusted enough to actually pull us where we wanted to go. Otherwise, we would have. And that was really that encounter, which was the very beginning of the session, was the closest thing to combat that we got into. We didn't get any other combats, and that was actually the closest thing to actually engaging with the mechanics of Cairn that we did. So we had a great time, and I'm not saying this as a bad thing. I enjoyed the session very much. Just to point out that someone, I think it was Ian in Discord, said like, "Well, how did the game go?" And I said like, "We really didn't. It was a Cairn. It was an investigative adventure running Cairn, but it could have been run in anything. It could have been run in nothing because we literally didn't interact at all with Cairn's mechanics." And I actually love that stuff a lot. Where there's no mechanic to do the things we're doing is we got to ask questions. We got to try to finagle our way in. We got to try to convince somebody that, hey, you should let us come with us. And, my character Flint became kind of obsessed with werewolves. And as we'd find more traces of kind of werewolf activities or werewolf things, he was getting more and more fervent about the werewolf conspiracy, which was a lot of fun. He did find those 2 spell books. So presumably maybe he'll cast one of those spells at some point. I don't know. It doesn't really seem like it's his deal, but he might do that maybe. So that was a lot of fun. And it was a really fun thing. And one of the things that I happened to share a bit of a train ride as I was coming home with the GM, and he was saying about, we're talking about, how this would work for sort of a con game and kind of just talking about stuff, gaming kind of stuff. And he'd mentioned that in some other sort of investigative adventures that he'd run successfully, talk about these kind of propulsive events, that you're not just doing a Sherlock Holmes, you're trying to solve the past, but there's events that are propelling you forward. And that with this one, it's not that there weren't events propelling us forward, and I don't know if we necessarily needed them. But I would say maybe, and a couple things, like one time there was an explosion with the mine equipment, because with this game, and I don't know Cairn's, I don't have only a very fuzzy idea with what the sort of implied setting around Cairn is. I guess it's closer to, or at least this, he mentioned, is more Renaissance. So there's a little bit of steampunky kind of stuff going on. So mining equipment could explode. There's actually like some kind of machinery, some sort of machinery of some kind that can actually do things like explode, and some did. But they were hard to, so obviously, some malfeasance is going on, and we were definitely getting caught up in some of these a couple different factions. There are definitely some different people in the town with kind of different ideas. And what I really liked was these family names. And so if you're paying attention, you'll see these family names come up. And let me see, I think on my other card, I might have, this is the back of my card. So we'd run into, these families. Well, there's more than two. This is kind of a specific note, but there was the Westons and the Hurries and the, what's the other name? Lancasters. And so you have these different names that are coming. So as you're playing the game, if you're paying attention and you're seeing these different names popping up, that should be telling you something, because it's indicating a bit of kind of what faction they belong to. And as you may not know right away, but you're like, okay, the Hurry, Henry Hurry, this one, there's another Hurry over here. There's another, the Westons. And then you start to get a sense of, wait a minute, the Weston over here is arguing about this. It probably means that, assuming they're on the same page, then you're seeing this kind of faction of like, wait a minute, the Hurries and and these people want this, the Westons, want that. And a lot of that was really fun, but it has, nothing to do with, I think the interesting thing is you can run these games, and I wouldn't even, and something that I would almost aspire to is really being like, we don't need to interact with any particular mechanics we're playing. It's kind of that, there was that blog post that gained a lot of notoriety and fame about, what was it? It was about the Western, the TSR gunfighting game. I keep wanting to say Top Secret, but Boot Hill. And this idea with Boot Hill and how their Boot Hill game evolved, because there's basically no mechanics in at least the original versions of Boot Hill. There's always mechanics for shooting guns and doing the kind of, having gunfights and doing that, which are very detailed, and the gunfights are very brutal and fatal, as they should be, right? That they're pretty, they are very much kind of a last resort to really solve an issue. So if you see that as the players and you don't want to get into gunfights, then you start trying to figure out all this way you can do stuff without getting into gunfights. So you start doing stuff. And I think there was some of that in this game, because we're only 3. We're in a town full of people. We can't go just fighting everybody. And it seems like, and I don't know what werewolves are like in Cairn, but at least in my imagination, my little piddling Flint, or what is this class again? Fletchwind is probably not the match for one werewolf, let alone however many are hanging around potentially in here. So we're doing all this other stuff. We're trying to finagle with people. We're trying to, you're going over here. We're kind of following the Lord's what's his name, Lord Augustus's, negotiator. We're like, oh, you're going this way. I think we're going to go that way too. Oh no, not for the same reason you're going. We're going to be doing this thing over here, but we're just, we're traveling on the same roads. Let's go ahead and walk together. Oh, could we see this thing too? We're kind of interested. We're kind of posing as some kind of nebulous sales folk. Like we're here to, I think technically our cover story was, we're here to see if there's anything we can sell or maybe buy. It's not a good cover story. But you're just kind of doing that, and we didn't, you just play in the context. And obviously it's a one shot. He's trying to kind of run through. It is sort of an in development adventure. So there's not much. I don't think you want to stop. See, one of the things is, and I mentioned before, when you ask people to roll the dice, then what you're doing is you're pretty much are setting you're putting a fail state out there. Whereas if you can let people run with it or just kind of work with it, That's a real way to, that's one of the ways you can get a fail forward without having to have any kind of fail forward mechanic, is just to just keep playing. And I don't mean sort of in a yes and kind of way, but just keep it going. If you roll for a die that gives you kind of a yes no answer, then that sort of, you have to sort of have that yes. If you get the no, I think you have to honor the no, you know. But if you say to someone, you say, hey, can I walk with you? If you say, well, roll your persuasion, and then you roll, no, I got a 2. Oh no, you didn't persuade her, so no, right? I mean, granted, you could try to be thinking ahead and saying, oh, whatever, but it's hard. That's harder to do. Whereas if you just say in the context, someone asks you, well, can I walk with you? And you say, well, you can walk me up the road, but I'm going to have lunch with so and so, so when I'm going to be turning off the road over there, but you can walk with me up until we get to the estate or whatever. Okay, great. And then you can keep playing. Then maybe by the time we get to the estate, if we're doing some role play, maybe then you can have convinced them. Oh, hey, can you ask him if he has, I'm really tired. I got a cramp. I got a cramp in my leg. It would be okay if I came in and sat down and just kind of rested at this person's house while you guys are having dinner or lunch or whatever. And they're like, oh, well, they're not a bad person. They're not going to, oh, you have a cramp? Well, of course, you can come sit down. So on and so forth. Right? You can see how you can kind of just keep moving the game along, and you're still honoring sort of the context situation. Not necessarily giving away something that wouldn't be given away anyway, but you don't have to go to the dice and do something, which might give you a result that you don't want. Because I think once you go to the dice, you kind of got to live with the dice in some level. You can twist it, bend it, whatever, but you kind of, it's there. You've done it. Like, whereas just going kind of fluid, you can kind of keep things fluid. And we never rolled the dice. I did not roll any dice after character creation. We didn't succeed at everything. We certainly had our foibles around the way and had to deal with stuff. But yeah, and it was fun. It was fun. We're still investigating the mystery. I had the opportunities to be spoiled as to the kind of the overall thing, but I said no, or I said, please don't spoil me, or I don't want to get spoiled, because hopefully if I'm around for the conclusion, I want to experience it, and if I don't make it, then spoil me. Brian says, hello, sir, or madam, I'm a nebulous salesman. Do you have a minute to talk about sales? Exactly. I mean, that was pretty much it. We're like, oh, we heard about wondrous things, and this, the place is called Needle. We've heard of wondrous things in Needle, and we came to see it. And then that's where my character Flint would start saying, we came for wondrous things, and we ended up with werewolves, and then he would start yelling about werewolves. And then people at first didn't believe us, but we had the werewolf. We had that wolf tied up, and then when we came out the next morning, and the werewolf had turned into a man. It's a man, baby. Then that definitely bolstered their whole thing. There's a lot going on. I mean, it's fun. It was a fun thing. There was a lot going on. It was fun, and I'm glad to experience it. I'm glad that a backup opportunity came. There wasn't a full table. We actually, the other funny thing is, we're in New York. This is kind of a New York issue. I mean, it happens, right? So there's one of the problems that we ran into getting this game going yesterday was where to play. So the person who often hosts there was a plumbing issue in their apartment, so they couldn't host. I don't have the room to host. My apartment's tiny. If I were to be hosting a game, pretty much my wife and daughter would have to be in the bedroom. Like, we don't have enough rooms that aren't kind of interconnected, and everything's too loud. Just wouldn't work. So there's a lot of us, small apartment. You maybe have roommates, maybe where you just don't have the space. So we went. So our first plan was to go to this food hall that's in an area called Dumbo, which is in a pretty area, and it's right on the water, and it's nice. And there's this kind of fancier sort of food hall down there, but it was too loud. And it just so happened yesterday we had a torrential downpour for about 10 minutes, which just drenched everything in water. So at the food hall, they had outdoor tables, but those outdoor tables were just sopping wet, and it just kind of discouraged us from wanting to play there. Hey, Ian. So we happened to go to, unfortunately, it's a dying breed in a lot of places, but there's still some around. It's a diner. And there was maybe 10-minute walk away. There's a big diner that had a lot of empty space, and we were basically able to set up shop there and play. And the nice thing is, not to. I understand with game places you gotta make money, and I don't begrudge them the fees, but we didn't have to pay any fees. I mean, we bought food and drinks and stuff, and we basically had a whole space to ourselves And it was great. And if you like diner food, and I like diner food, you got a nice little meal out of it. So fun. But diners are kind of a little bit of a dying breed here. In some places, they don't really have them too much. But not a bad backup if you're thinking of a place you want a game. If you know a diner, some diners are pretty big, and they just have sort of areas that are mostly pretty empty, or at least not super full. And where we sat, we actually had a good sized table. We weren't squished into a tiny booth or anything. We had space. You might want to look at your local diner somewhere if you can go and you're and get some food and stuff to make it at least not really bad on the because you don't want to make it where you're putting it, you're taking up space and they could fill it and you're sitting there for hours and hours. In our case, the place was empty, so we weren't taking up space that would otherwise have been used. We were eating, so we were eating and drinking, and a couple guys got some beer and stuff. So we weren't abusing the space, but you might look at it as a possibility. Okay, that's almost the hour already. Whew. All right, before we go, let's take a look. I'm already here at the OSR subreddit. Let's see what there is to see. Okay. ODD BX. Is this a question? Okay, so we'll see. We'll see what this one. So this is posted 3 hours ago by Forsaken B 0110. ODD-BX. I played BX back in the 1980s, which we kept coming back to even after jumping to AD&D. In the last few years, I've gotten back into tabletop role-playing games and was fortunate to find various BX variants that did an amazing job at updating and organizing the rules. Then something interesting happened. I purchased Swords and Wizardry and really enjoyed it, even more than the other BX retro clones. It felt in many ways how we played in the 80s. I realized it was based on OD&D, not BX. Was I playing BX wrong in the 80s? We were teenagers making rules up as we went, so that is certainly possible. I have to admit it did feel more liberating for me to play. I watched Professor DM on Dungeon Craft. Many of his instructional videos seem to lean into OD&D style play. I also picked up Shadow Dark, which also seems to have more of an OD&D philosophy as well. I don't know. Hey, more power to you, but I have a hard time seeing how Shadow Dark has an OD&D philosophy, but sure. Is it me, or is there a small movement to OD&D style play? Not just rulings over rules, but also rulings, not rules. Are there other OD&D type games? I don't think that, OD&D, this is that thing, right, where we're looking at it in this lens of all this stuff. Like, OD&D is not about rulings over rules. They just, and I covered this at some point where I looked at a Gygax letter. You could probably find the video or stream, whatever I did it, where he talks about that they were trying to get something out sooner rather than later because they felt market pressure. So they basically kind of rushed out the 3 brown books, and then they started adding to it. It was not about rulings over rules. I mean, yes, we didn't have the concept. The concept didn't exist yet of trying to make a whole bunch of mechanisms to kind of cover everything. It was kind of like you're going to add ad hoc, but it wasn't really rulings over rules. It was really, I almost feel like the thing was make your own rules. I kind of wish this rulings over rules hasn't gotten so almost etched. It's not that it's terrible, but that wasn't really the intention. The intention was that you would come up with your own rules. Like you make a ruling, as you might in any game, to keep things moving. Hey, Croco. To keep things moving, and then if that ruling seems to work, it turns into a rule. So then you write it down. Oh, we need rules for drowning. 3 brown books don't have rules for drowning. I think this makes sense. And you're like, well, and you just want to get forward. It's like, okay, we're going to do this we're going to roll a 1d6 and add your constitution or, whatever it is. And you go, okay, great. And then, you play that and you go, wow, that worked. So, okay, you write it down in your little rule book. All right. Whenever you're drowning, here's our rule. And you go from there. I think the idea was that we're not going to try to cover every rule under the sun. But again, I think that was partly because they were kind of rushed. And I think there was this ethos of, which again, Gygax in this, I think that same letter talks about, which is everyone's going to kind of take this chassis and make their own game on top of it. And no one's game is going to be the same. Of course, by the time you get to AD&D, where he does try to make rules for everything, that tune has changed. But this idea that it was like, oh, rulings over rules, that's not really what it was. And I don't want to say it bothers me, but it's just a thing that I don't think it's really what was going on. I don't think that was really the intent. Croco, because sometimes pressure cuts out the waste. It can. I mean, it can also cut out things like clarity, or things like what are the ranges for missile weapons, and yes, it can have a lot of things. Some good, some bad. Necessity is the mother of invention. I believe that, and I appreciate that, but I think it's a little bit of rose-colored glasses. If it's like, yeah, pressure cut out the waste, it also cut out a whole bunch of stuff that they probably could have used. I mean, the thing is now it's almost impossible, or it is impossible, or maybe some people don't. I know I can't, to read OD&D and not insert all the things we know about D&D from the last 50 years on top of it. But I can't imagine, if I didn't have a wargaming background, what the heck you're supposed to do with those rules. It's just would have been really tough, or you just would have been like, well, screw it, we're gonna have. And I mean, I think people do, like, okay, we're just gonna figure something out, and that's what they did. And I think he was fine with that, at least up until a little bit later. Brian says, first idea, best idea. I mean, that sometimes is true, but you actually got to write it down too. Yeah, first idea might be your best idea, but you still got to write it. You still got to get it on paper. Let's see. So there's not really much. Is there some? I mean, I think some people do like. I mean, I think there is a community that is OD&D based. I don't know. I think it's really a new thing. I'm not sure, but all right. Let me do one more. That wasn't really satisfying. That wasn't satisfying. I still wonder, like, Shadow Dark is an OD&D vibe. Does anyone else get OD&D vibe from Shadow Dark? Because I don't, but maybe he hasn't read 5e and some other stuff. Some of that stuff seems, I don't know. I'm not feeling. I mean, I don't have anything against Shadow Dark. But I'm not feeling that particular comparison. Let's see. Some art, some stuff. Tales from the Wolf Guard. Thing in the Valley. All right, let's keep on moving. Is there anything? There's a Mouse Ritter SRD released. Excellent. I'll look at that for later. I'm not going to look at it right now. Well, my game ditches the D20, but it's not quite ready yet. So the answer to do any OSR games ditch the D20, the answer is yes. But I can't say mine yet because I don't know. How to encourage Quest for it. Is there anything best modules to place in a sandbox? How deadly? There doesn't seem to be anything really good. All right, hold on. Wow, they already deleted. So user deleted said, recently on Blue Sky, there's been an eruption of discourse around the idea of if a designer needs to have published good adventures to be trusted to make a good system. So I pose a slightly altered question to this community. Do you trust a designer who hasn't put out any adventures or sandbox materials to make a system? I mean, I didn't see the Blue Sky discourse. I don't think they need to have. No, I don't think they need to have published good adventures. I'm trying to think what they would need. I think, number one, you go to the bookstore. Brian asks if Daggerheart is all the rage now. It seems to be, Brian. Daggerheart is definitely. Daggerheart fever is striking the nation, sweeping across the nation. Brian says, at heart, I think anybody can make a game. Yeah. And I think, you go back to the 80s, or really up until the real internet adoption. And when you go to a gaming shop and you buy somebody's book, you generally don't know who the heck they are. And you just, they had to go through some kind of publishing rigmarole to get a book made. But other than that, like, I don't know who they are. So, now it's like you're looking up at everybody and maybe you're saying, oh, they wrote it. And then you're trying to Google search or do whatever to see what else they did. I don't think you have to. I think you can have a good idea. You could be playing games and have a great idea for a system. I don't even know if that's really unusual. That maybe you don't even run any games at all. Forget publishing any adventures. You might not have run any adventures. You may have been a player in a bunch of games and different systems, and then suddenly you get a brainstorm like, my gosh, I think if I took the things I liked out of all these systems, that I've been playing and put together, I think I'd have a pretty cool system. And so you do that. I don't think publishing is the same as experience or having an aptitude. There are many, many, many reasons why you might not publish anything. Now, if you've published a bunch of adventures and people say they stink, I don't know, you think they stink, then maybe you probably won't like that system. But I can guarantee that people have been publishing stuff, probably somebody likes them. You may not like them, might not be to your taste, but it's probably someone else's taste. Brian says, when I was young, I saw my older brother and cousin make their own version of Monopoly and make their own community chest cards with boobs drawn on them. That's how I realized making is part of play. Yep. Yeah, there's a lot. I wouldn't be held back by that. Obviously, if you're designing a system, I mean, a lot of it comes to like, what are you charging? You know, you making something and you're charging $100 for it and you have no, whatever. I mean, you got to make that. Maybe that comes to your evaluation of a product. Is like, boy, you're charging me $200 for this huge tome of a book, and I don't know who you are, and whatever. Like that's kind of that evaluating the maybe your whether you're going to buy or not. But ultimately, no, I don't think you have to have published. I think that the key is you have to have an idea and be able to communicate it on paper, which is, what we're going to be reading. All right, folks. Well, thanks for hanging out. I got to jump. I'm glad to get one of these streams kind of out, get back on a regular schedule. I posted that video yesterday about, dungeon delving. Do you need to have dungeon delving in your game? And the answer is no. I mean, you can have as much or as little of as you want, but don't let anyone tell you, like some yahoos on Reddit saying, like, if it doesn't have dungeon crawling in it, then you're missing out on blah, blah, blah. Like that. They can take long walks off short piers. Have a great rest of your weekend if you're happen to be watching this today on a Friday. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.